Now is the time to buy Xavier Worthy and Jordan Addison in your Dynasty leagues. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're going to give you some trade targets, a player that you should consider trading away, why his value is at an all-time high, and a couple players to hold in your Dynasty leagues. But Kate, we teased it at the top. I want to talk about Jordan Addison to start, why this is the right time to trade for Jordan Addison. But before I give my thoughts, I want your thoughts because I know you're not quite as high on Jordan Addison as I am. So I want your thoughts here.
I've never been quite as high on Jordan Addison as you have. And again, like, it's not because of the lack of talent, just, investing heavily in a team's wide receiver to, with another elite tight end receiving option, like some question marks there. But I got to say, Marcus, through 3 weeks of the season, in seeing what this Kevin O'Connell offense can be without Kirk Cousins, like, my concerns are kind of alleviated a little bit. Like, this system can make up for pretty much everything. And I do think the price for Jordan Addison is a little bit suppressed right now. He's been injured. He's had some off the field incidents that we should probably also talk about. But like, there's a good reason his value is suppressed, and we might want to jump on that.
So Justin Jefferson is obviously going to get his. Right now, he is the 5th overall wide receiver in fantasy. Not surprising. By the time we get to the end of the year, Kate, that's going to be pretty high. Do you know where Jalen Naylor, who is currently the number 2 receiver for the Vikings, is at? Do you know where where his scoring is?
It's going to be ridiculously high.
Yeah, it's in the top 30, right? He's scored a touchdown in all 3 games. He's getting targets, and it's just clear, like, when Jordan Addison comes back, he's going to step right into that role, and Naylor's going to go back to the bench or as his 3rd receiver. Our biggest concern this offseason when it came to Jordan Addison was, will the quarterback be good enough to continue to keep up his efficiency, to continue to have this passing attack be good? And I think through 3 games, the answer is absolutely yes. And there's no doubt that Addison is a better receiver than Naylor, which should make this offense with Darnold even better. So right now, I think is the time to go get Jordan Addison because he's pretty cheap. I don't think his value has ever been lower. Now, he might play this week against Green Bay. He might not, but he is a receiver that is being drafted outside the top 30 that I want every league.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, again, this value is suppressed right now, and it is for good reason. He was injured through training camp, suffered a sprained ankle, so that was a problem. Came back and then immediately sprained the other ankle. So like, there have really been no positive headlines surrounding Jordan Addison, which again, just kind of like, this is a market driven so frequently by recency bias. And the good news is there is none in the positive direction of Jordan Addison.
Yeah, I just really believe in the talent. I really believe in Kevin O'Connell, and I want to go get him. A couple recent trades from Dynasty League football, Jordan Addison for Najee Harris straight up.
I'll take Addison.
Yeah, I would take Addison as well. This one's interesting. I'm assuming this is a non-tight end premium league. Jordan Addison for Dalton Kincaid.
I'll take Jordan Addison.
I would lean Kincaid there just because I still really believe in the talent, but I don't feel great about it. How about Jordan Addison for Christian Watson straight up?
Oh, Jordan Addison so easily.
Jordan Addison.
Like last year, 911 yards as a rookie, 10 touchdowns, my biggest concern, like he's obviously not going to produce another 10 touchdowns without Kirk Cousins on board, but apparently that possibility still exists because Jalen Nailor has been just fine here as the wide receiver too. Again, TBD on like what this looks like with TJ Hawkinson also in the mix, but I think what we're looking at is the wide receiver two, a very talented wide receiver two on a really good Kevin O'Connell offense, regardless of who's under center. It feels a lot safer. Now, from a off the field standpoint, obviously there have been a few issues here with Jordan Addison. We've also had this conversation about what off the field stuff means for a guy like Rashee Rice. Do you have any input in terms of what he's off?
I don't. It seems like I've just read a couple things. It seems like a suspension might happen in 2025, but I think it's going to be a much less significant suspension compared to Rashee Rice. We've seen previously these kind of situations get players 2 or 3 game suspensions. In the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. And in fact, you wish it would have happened this year, right? Because he's already missed 2.5 games, might miss a 3rd game. So it's not that big of a deal. I'm willing to kind of ignore it when it comes to trades. But as much as I love Jordan Addison, Kate, the number 1 trade target for me is Xavier Worthy. And I've been pretty consistent in this. I think now is a good time to buy. So he had this really nice week 1 game where he had 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. But over the last 2 weeks, 2 catches, 17 yards against the Bengals, 2 catches, 17 yards against the Falcons. Has had a couple carries, but nothing significant. 4.2, 5.0 fantasy points in PPR leagues. I wouldn't be surprised if the dynasty manager that has Xavier Worthy is not panicked, but maybe they're not valuing him as high as they were 3 weeks ago. And I think now is the time to trade for him because of all the things you mentioned, right? Like we know Rashee Rice is going to be suspended next year. And I think it's going to be for a long time. Worthy's only 20 years old. He's going to be 21 at this point in the season or in just a couple of weeks. Yeah. I'm buying a really young receiver that's tied to Patrick Mahomes.
And here's another aspect to the Xavier Worthy market that I think is probably also kind of being worked into his current value is the fact that Patrick Mahomes hasn't played particularly well to this point. He hasn't looked like Patrick Mahomes so far this year. Some stellar plays, but still like the floor has felt a little bit lower for Patrick Mahomes this year than it has in previous seasons. He's thrown at least 1 interception in each of his 3 games so far this year. Even against the Cincinnati Bengals, threw 2 picks against the defense that I don't think could stop wind blowing through a paper bag at this point.
Nope.
Like there's some, interesting aspects to Patrick Mahomes' play right now. On pace to average just under 220 passing yards per game, completing a career high 69.6% of passes through this year, but on the back of a very low average depth of target, which we also know isn't necessarily conducive to the type of game that they're probably going to be executing here with Xavier Worthy. Now, I think some of that is the fact that they utilize Rashee Rice a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, and he has commanded the bulk of the targets. But as defenses adjust to the Rashee Rice breakout, like I think this offense is going to continue to open up. I think even Travis Kelce probably going to get a little bit more work as defenses shift from maybe not covering Travis Kelce as heavily and giving some of that attention to Rashee Rice. Like these things are going to balance out over the course of the season. I think we're obviously going to see a bounce back from Patrick Mahomes, despite a little bit of a rocky start to the season. Like you wouldn't have guessed they're 3-0 based on the fact that like their starting running back went down. He's thrown 5 picks, 4 interceptions. Like there's a lot left in terms of ground that we can cover for this Chiefs offense.
The most recent trade from Dynasty League football was Xavier Worthy and Cordero Patterson, whatever, for Josh Jacobs straight up. I'd rather have Worthy.
Yeah.
I think you can get him not cheap because whoever drafted him likely spent a 1st-round pick on them. They're going to remember that week 1 game. So the value is still going to be inflated. However, I think as we get further on in the season, the Chiefs are just going to lean on him more and more. Remember last year, Kate, when we were doing these shows talking about Rashee Rice playing behind Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Justin Watson. Like we were just waiting for the game where Rashee Rice was going to run 50% of the routes. This is typically what the Chiefs do at wide receiver. They slow play these guys. And then hopefully by the second half of the year, they start to break out. And that's exactly what happened to Rashee Rice last year. I'm going to bet it's going to happen with Xavier Worthy again, too.
For sure.
All right, let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, who has looked awesome through the first 3 weeks of the season. Is now the time to sell? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season big with a awesome deal on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And get this, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You don't have to win or lose your bet or anything like that. Once you place your bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You can use those bonus bets to bet on games like the Cowboys and Giants tonight. The Cowboys are 5.5-point favorites. I think that's a stupid line. But hey, we'll see. We'll see if the Cowboys can get the win tonight and cover. I would take the Giants and the points tonight. But again, go to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and you can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is FanDuel.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are going over some trade targets on this Thursday morning. Okay, let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, who I've always loved, always been a big fan of his. He's looked really good the first couple of weeks of the season. Had his best game of the year last week against Chicago. Is now the time to trade him with his value being not at an all-time high, but higher than it's been in any of the past several years?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of been hard to like put all your stock in Jonathan Taylor just from a health standpoint even. We haven't seen him fully healthy in like 2 years. So seeing him healthy, seeing him look like a capable running back, yeah, that's pretty exciting. So I can understand the desire to get out. So like I'll say ahead of this season, this would have been a headline that I'm like all in on. But I'm starting to like suddenly have these doubts. So maybe this is where you can like teeter me back into the hashtag trade Jonathan Taylor camp. We're seeing a renaissance of NFL running backs. We're seeing Saquon Barkley kind of emerge despite the fact that he has 8,000 touches on his body. He's looking like a spring chicken. Like, is the RB cliff for fantasy football suddenly looking a little bit different as of this year? Or is this an anomaly? Or is it just because we're through 3 weeks of the season?
That's what it is. I don't have concerns about these older running backs looking good early in the year. What I get concerned about is when we get to the dog days of the season and it's November and you're playing a third game in 11 days, like a lot of these teams have to do. What kind of juice do you have left after you had 175 touches, on the ground? And I think for somebody like Saquon and somebody like Jonathan Taylor, their teams are just using them up early in the season. It's probably smart, right? Like they have the juice and the gas right now to be workhorse backs. But I bet by the time we get to December and January, they're going to be not parts of committees, but you're going to see the workload lessen. And that's my fear with Taylor, who already has a history of injuries, right? I don't trust this Colts team. I don't trust that the quarterback is going to put them in positions to score touchdowns. I also don't trust that Jonathan Taylor is going to get some goal line carries because that's kind of what Anthony Richardson does. So if I can flip Jonathan Taylor for name your receiver, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Rome Odunze, maybe Dunze is a little far down, but you get the point. Like if I can flip him for a wide receiver of equal value, or if I can trade him for a running back like James Cook and something else,
Jonathan Brooks and something else.
Exactly. I think I'm considering it because my fear with Jonathan Taylor's value, Kate, is, and you know how this is in dynasty leagues, once he turns 26 in January, we're going to see his value fall off. And is that fair? Probably not. But dynasty owners and managers, they get really scared when they see that 2-6 number next to Jonathan Taylor. I think now is a pretty good time to sell him considering how well he played last week.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. And even if it's like he's still producing, if you just want to move on and get a younger running back on his team, the longer you wait to trade a player of his age, like the longer things are, it's going to be harder for you to move on. Now, I will also say to your point, I'm probably less even concerned about like the age aspect of Jonathan Taylor. I think you hit it on the nose on the head, that hit it on the
nail on the head.
Whatever. You hit something there with your analysis there. Like the Colts offense is kind of the most concerning part for me. And I don't want to like overreact, but I kind of am overreacting because my biggest concern, and we've said this a million times throughout the offseason, was can Anthony Richardson develop as a passer? And I feel like we've just kind of seen him almost regress. I mean, that interception in the red zone was last week where, I mean, he wasn't throwing to one of his teammates. He was just throwing into triple coverage with like, they weren't even covering one of his teammates. They were just huddled in a group. Like, it's not just the inaccuracy. It's the bad decision-making that's also stalling out drives for this group, which makes it really, really challenging to establish the run game, despite the fact that you have a lot of talent on offense. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, we saw him periodically game scripted out for the entire fourth quarter, like because they said, they want to be establishing the receiving game. They're playing from behind. Like, how often is that going to be the case, despite the fact that Jonathan Taylor's played really well? Like, I don't want to see week 2 play out again. He played 52% of the snaps, despite averaging 8.58 yards per carry, had 32 receiving yards. Like,
I know, I'm with you. I love Jonathan Taylor, and I think you look at their schedule, they've got a pretty tough schedule coming up, including this week against Pittsburgh. And I just have a fear that, like, if he has a couple bad games in a row, which happens to every running back, just to be clear, but because he doesn't get a lot of work in the receiving game, I think his boom and bust weeks can be pretty big. Like, the difference can be big there. I'm thinking now might be the time to trade him. Just cash out on the value of him. Move him for another running back and something else, or move him for another receiver. And I think you're going to be better off long-term. You hate to trade away a talent as special as Jonathan Taylor, but we're getting to that point in his career where it's like the value is not going to be getting any higher. We know that. It's just how fast is it going to fall? I'd rather be a year too early than a year too late.
Yeah, and I think the idea of trading Jonathan Taylor for some players that might have, maybe not as quite a high in upside here, but like Jonathan Taylor and for a package of Jonathan Brooks plus, for, James Cook plus. I think all of these are kind of the right direction if you want to get younger here on your dynasty roster. And maybe you just don't want to deal with the headache of an aging running back on your roster. Yep. I think Jonathan Taylor might, contribute to your roster. I have him as top 5 running back rest of season. But again, this is just kind of a move where if I can get ahead of it, it might be a good idea. And you might have sold me on that.
All right, okay, let's talk about a tight end and whether we should be buying, selling, or holding. Let's talk about Sam Laporta next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the absolute best way to get tickets to your favorite sports, music, theater, and comedy events near you. Gametime now has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier than ever before. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime also has a panoramic view of your seat, so you know exactly what your seats are going to look like before you buy. Plus, they have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go listen to the Locked On NFL Now with 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Kate, I want to talk about Sam Laporta, who was the consensus tight end 1 all off season long after a fantastic rookie season. But so far this year, Kate, 8 catches, 94 yards, 0 touchdowns on 10 targets. Now he's dealing with a ankle injury. We don't know the severity. Dan Campbell said that it's a minor low ankle injury. But are you holding him just hoping that he gets healthy, or are you consider selling him for Dalton Kincaid plus Brock Bowers plus? What are your thoughts here?
I mean, it probably depends on your needs, because I do think, like, I have no reservations here. Sam Laporta is my tight end 1. Like, that would be kind of like if after, Kyle Pitts' literally historic rookie season, we're like, it's been a rough 3 weeks. Like, no, Sam Laporta also had a historic rookie season. He is on a very good NFL offense, of which he is a centerpiece. And I do think we're going to see a little bit of a regression back to the mean. By all accounts, it seems like this is a fairly minor ankle sprain. But here's the thing, Marcus, like, tight end production is just down across the board. Like, It's not like we're seeing Sam Laporta struggle, but Trey McBride's posted 3 100+ receiving yard games and a touchdown. Dalton Kincaid's not absolutely crushing it. Like, Mark Andrews doesn't exist anymore. Like, we're not seeing any tight end find tremendous success this season, which is why I'm like, okay, if I sell Sam Laporta right now, it's not like I'm really gaining anything. It's not like I'm gaining a more productive player, most likely.
No, you could sell him for another tight end and something else.
That's fair. So, like, if you're looking to break down the asset and you need some depth, maybe at like the wide receiver position, and you can create a package there, all for you. But I'm not like looking to move on from Sam Darnold based on anything that I've seen.
Sam Laporta, not Sam Darnold. I'm definitely not moving on from Sam Darnold. Definitely not.
God, no, Sam Laporta. Good God. Man, I just can't stop thinking about this efficient start to the season for Sam Darnold, you guys. Let me
give you an example. Let me give you an example. So right now on Dynasty League Football, this is a super flex league. Sam Laporta was traded for Jaden Daniels and James Conner.
I'll do it. As long as you have, again, this is kind of like the thing. Like, do you have other viable?
Let me give you another one. Sam Laporta for Dalton Kincaid. So you're downgrading in tight end, and Tank Dell.
I would do that.
Yeah. See, and I think that's what's interesting to me. One of the things that had me concerned about Laporta this morning when I was doing research. So he's played 20 games in the regular season. 12 of those 20 games, he's been held under 47 receiving yards, right? A lot of his production last year was touchdown dependent, and he has just 0 this year. This is always the fear with tight ends that score a lot of touchdowns, but maybe don't rack up a bunch of yards, is that if they're not scoring touchdowns, are they basically just a league average tight end? And that's been the case for Laporta. Now, touchdowns are fluky. He could come back and score 2 this week and all would be right with the world, right? But if he's going to be your number 1 overall tight end, I want some level of consistency and baseline production. And too often we just haven't seen that. 60% of the time he's not giving you that. And it makes me a little bit concerned.
I think that's fair, but are there any players right now that you have that confidence level in? That's the only counter that I have to that. Bowers. Okay.
Yeah. Because
who has
Kincaid
yet
is
to
the
score his
same way.
first NFL touchdown.
I know. Kincaid bothers me the same way because he's the same thing. He has 99 receiving yards through 3 games. Now and this is the thing we talked about all offseason, right? Like the difference between Kincaid and Laporta last year was the touchdowns, right? In the second half of the year, they averaged the same amount of receiving yards, and it was Laporta that caught touchdowns and Kincaid did. This year, Kincaid's catching the touchdowns and Laporta's not. And that's why you see Kincaid outscoring Laporta. So maybe you can't break him down for that much anymore in a trade, but I would be willing to see what's out there for Laporta right now, where I think maybe a couple of months ago, I wouldn't.
I think that's fair. And again, kind of roster dependent. What are you looking to accomplish? Are you looking to accomplish more depth? Do you have a lot of depth and you have the luxury of, because I do think, again, the ceiling for Sam Laporta pretty high. Surprisingly, despite the number of playmakers this Lions offense has, it's still a more concentrated target share than what they've got in Buffalo right now, which they're just spreading the ball out to literally, like, I don't know, bring some random guy down from the stands, a random woman, and throw them the ball, and they'll probably catch a touchdown because Josh Allen's that good. Like, I think like Sam Laporta, a guy I'm holding, I am not concerned at all based on what we've seen. I'm not concerned about the injury, but every roster decision that you make in your dynasty league is so individual to your team, your needs, and where you're at in your build. And that's why we give you all of this context while we have this conversation, because we don't know where you're at. Only you know where you're at, and only you can see which pieces of this you want to put together to build the ultimate dynasty roster.
There you go. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Dynasty League Football, Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.